History is filled with the ghosts of forgotten literary works. And in our time, a few novels have been reclaimed by concerned scholars and readers like yourselves. On this channel, we've discussed a few of these authors and literary works, like Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston and Iola Leroy by Frances E.W. Harper, that faded into history only to become resurrected after renewed interests. We have another opportunity to save a book. Would you save this book? This is a big achievement in more ways than one. Divine Days has had a fraught history, and none of that has been because of the quality of the writing. Leon Forrest, the author, counted the great Toni Morrison as an editor and champion of his work. And Ralph Ellison wrote one of his only introductions ever for Forrest's first book. Divine Days' closest comparisons are novels that are wildly popular in literary fiction. The most mentioned is Ulysses by James Joyce. That's heavy praise. Henry Louis Gates Jr. called it The Black War and Peace. But aside from the length, that might be a tough comparison because they really are different sorts of novels. Other comparisons in reviews and scholarship include Gravity's Rainbow by Thomas Pynchon, Native Son, and there's a Chicago connection there, The Sound and the Fury by William Faulkner, 1,000 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and one of my favorites, Mumbo Jumbo by Ishmael Reed. The novel's aesthetics are firmly entrenched in postmodernism, so I would add many other and almost any other postmodern works from the 80s and early 90s as similar comparisons. No, its difficulties with achieving similar fame as these other novels came from some unfortunate circumstances beyond the book itself, as well as some familiar villains like cultural biases. New York Review writer Christopher Bird described a 1993 warehouse fire in which the majority of the initial print run of this book was destroyed. In a reprint by W. Norton, hundreds of corrections by the author could not be included, so the resulting product was printed incomplete. Despite being a major landmark in American literature, the book never really had a chance to get off the ground. And as a result, the achievement has been largely lost to time. But the reprint of this 1,100-page novel in February of 2023 has renewed its interest. I realize that this book is not much of a looker. The neon colors evoke perhaps the Caribbean styles of a 90s Jimmy Buffett revival. But that really is not what this book is about at all. However, the cover design might give us some indication of some of its cursed promotional runs. By the way, please like and subscribe to support Tilting at Tomes and the work of this channel. Also, a quick citation. I heard about Divine Days from two YouTube book people. One is Noteworthy Fiction by Nicole, and there's an older post by DJ Reeds. In its short history, the novel Divine Days by Leon Forrest has had an unfortunate series of trials and setbacks. But all is not lost. We still have an opportunity to save this book and keep up the interest in this author. Leon Forrest was originally born in Chicago. He served in the armed forces and he taught at Northwestern University for over 21 years. He was also inducted into the Chicago Literary Hall of Fame in 2013. Forrest wrote several other books that also largely escaped public notice, and they include There Is A Tree More Ancient Than Eden, 1973, Random House. The Bloodworth Orphans, Random House, 1977. Two Wings to Veil My Face, Asphodel, and posthumously Meteor in the Madhouse, Northwestern University, 2001. Most of these books are difficult to find, but if you can become a fan of Divine Days, these other books feature characters and narratives that interconnect with it. I realize that this is a big, intimidating looking book. It's heavy, it's thick, it's 1,135 pages. However, despite its comparisons with some difficult books, I actually found it more accessible than those others. Perhaps this is because of the references and language that are more contemporary. So let's look at the content of the novel. The story of the book occurs over a week and a day, Wednesday, February 16th to Wednesday, February 22nd, 1966. However, it has lots of flashbacks and side narratives that venture into the fictional neighborhood of Forest County, Illinois, in the south side of Chicago. Another major storyline takes readers into the South and travels, of course, along the Great Migration from the early to mid 20th century. The main character's name is Jobert Jones, and he's been away from Chicago in the army in Germany for 2 years. When he comes back, his Aunt Eloise employs him at her nightlight lounge as a bartender and also at her newspaper as an investigative journalist. But he really wants to be a playwright. Lots of the action follows the outlandish characters who frequent the bar, but much of the story follows Jobert Jones's research into the mysterious disappearance of local legend Sugar Groove. He features prominently in the book. Jones eventually wants to write a play inspired by Groove's life. During his investigation, the narrative crosses paths with an infamous trickster figure, W.A.D. Ford, who has also disappeared amid a related investigation from the FBI. He ran an infamous church called Divine Days, and at one point, Jones has observed one of the church's week long rituals called the Purgation of Evil. The book has several narrative innovations and insights on Black American historiography. In fact, Forest themes are an attempt to relate a cohesive story of a Black 20th century through migration, resilience, and renewal. First, let me say Divine Days is not a perfect novel, but I don't know any novels, even long held classics, that are. It lags at times and it fixates on some characters who do not seem to contribute to the main trunk of the narrative. The list of characters is also expansive, and keeping track of everyone's backstory and relevance can be challenging. I didn't mind that because it gave me an opportunity to work out my memory. Also, most of Forrest's characters are outlandish enough that forgetting them is more difficult than not. While some passages drag, others soar. And the difference between the stagnation in a few passages and the high points in others calls attention to one of Divine Days' major themes: renewal. A major strength, he says, of Black folks in America has been the ability to revitalize, adapt, and renew. Toward the end of the book, a seer, Warren Wilkerson, characterizes this idea. He says, "But our human rage was always to make a way out of no way, and to create a synthesis out of all nightmares that our experience kept throwing up at us. That will to synthesize was what Du Bois never understood: to absorb and reinvent, to take it all in and to masticate it and process it and spew it back out as lyrical and soaring as a rift from Father Louis. Okay, for those of us who don't know, Father Louis is Louis Armstrong. Divine Days, among other things, is a veritable encyclopedia of literary and cultural references. As Jobert Jones discovers more and more about Sugar Groove, what he finds is a character who is not the romantic or mythic person he believed him to be at the beginning of the book, but a person who had human flaws, who could turn moments of his and other lives into an opportunity at rebirth or renewal. The narrative voice plays a major role in this sense of renewal. While Forrest has had episodes of very conventional writing style in the book, these give way to dramatic shifts in voice and perspective. When the setting shifts to Sugar Groove's past in the South, the writing closely resembles a Faulkner novel. In the more mythic locales, the narrative emulates a Homeric fantasy or biblical verse. Four surreal passages parallel the heights of Pynchon or Reed. He also seems to invent the musicality of several voices. During a car ride with a friend, the conversation style begins to mimic what critics like Kenneth Warren have called a mid century jazz like tonation. The changes between voices are not formal transitions, so much of the novel's difficulties comes from, as a reader, having to reorient one's perspective to new language, new voice, and even a new perspective. But in this way, Forrest presents us with a story that is continually renewing and reinventing itself. Divine Days is a major work of American fiction and a major entry into African American literary canon. It's gone largely ignored, and if we are not careful, it may be lost. However, we've had several models from past works that can help bring attention to this book. Here is a call to arms. First, and you're already doing this, is to learn more about Leon Forrest and his book. Knowledge is the first step to preservation. Second, simply mention it to others in a conversation and spread that knowledge. Bring it up in conversations in a book club, mention it on YouTube, or reference it in a class. I mentioned it in a book club and I received a great response and even more reading recommendations. I had a great conversation on it. Third, consider buying the book. Although it has been kept alive by the generous support of university and independent presses, these presses do not have a long reach, either publicly or financially. Finally, and I know that this is a big ask, read the book. It belongs in the pantheon of American literature. Thank you for listening. This has been Tilting at Tomes. I'm Ben. I will see you in the next episode. Thank you very much.